when I sat down and drew out exactly the different ways I could help somebody protect their mortgage, there were 5. Okay. And I'm going to go through all 5 of them with you today. The first one would be paying off the house in full. Okay. Number one, how do you protect a mortgage? You pay the house off, pay it all off. When someone dies, house is paid off, mortgage payment's gone forever. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is a partial payoff. So you have a husband and a wife, both make about the same amount of money. Want to make sure that if either one passes, they can afford the mortgage payment. They might not be able to afford 100% full payoff, but if we could take that payment from $1,200 a month to $600 a month, then the surviving spouse would still be able to live comfortably, make the mortgage payment, and most importantly, keep a roof over their head. That would be the second option. The third option would be what we call a transfer of assets plan. So if I own a house and when I pass, I want to make sure that my children, or let's say I have 3 kids, 2 of my kids have their own homes, one of them doesn't. I want to make sure when I die, my child can inherit my house and take over that property. That would be a transfer of assets plan. Now, you can transfer the assets through a payoff the entire mortgage, but most of the time, these are folks in their upper, 60s, 70s, sometimes even 80s. They want to just make sure that their son or grandchild can take over the mortgage payment, essentially. So that'd be option number 3. Option number 4 would be equity protection, as far as house is worth 400, balance of the loan is 100. There's $300,000 in equity. We want to make sure that when they pass, the family has enough time to get the house cleaned up, listed, and sold so that the bank doesn't take the house and the equity. And then the 5th option, and we're going to go into detail with all of these, would be the reverse mortgage protection. This was a concept that changed the game for me, especially with your senior mortgage protection clients, because the biggest complaint I would say I hear from agents is, and it's not even a complaint, it's a concern, is I don't know how to help someone that's 75 years old, a couple that have a mortgage, because they're 75 and $180,000 in coverage is way out of their budget. So again, I'd write these down if I were you, because all 5 of these, this is the 5. Now you can go, well, I do payment protection. I'll explain to you why you want to be able to identify which type of close you're going to present and why you're going to want to call it one of these 5. And it'll make sense, hopefully, at the end of this as to why I'm saying that. But again, write these down. So you can pay off the house in full. That's option 1. You can do a partial payoff. That's option 2. You can do a transfer of assets plan. That's option 3. You can do an equity protection plan. That's option 4. And then a reverse mortgage plan. That's option 5. So let's start with the first option. A pay off the house in full option. Now, inside of this option, you can also use the cash back option. Okay, so you could do cash back with this plan. You could do no cash back with this plan, or you can do a payment protector with this plan, HMS payment protector, the decreasing term. You can do any one of those 3 with the pay off the house in full. The option that most people really enjoy is the cashback option, pay your house off 5 years or 10 years early. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit about how you present that, what you say, and what tools you need to be able to show your clients what that looks like in a way that makes sense to them, not only mentally, but monetarily. So the first thing you want to do is either download a mortgage calculator that allows you to show amortization schedules. And essentially an amortization schedule is a schedule of what your balance of the loan will be in each month throughout that term of the mortgage. So let's just say it's a 30-year loan. That's 360 payments. So if I have my amortization schedule pulled up, I can go look at month 24 and see exactly what the balance of the loan will be. So why is that important? So when we do the cashback option to pay your house off early, we're typically doing it for 25 or 20 years. 25-year plan seems to be the most affordable in most scenarios. Not saying I've never done a 20-year pay your house off early or a 15-year, but the 25-year plan seems to be the most cost effective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in their information on their mortgage. And let's just say the house balance of the loan now is $200,000. So I go to my handy dandy mortgage calculator. I put in loan amount of 200 grand. Then it's going to ask me what the interest rate is. I'm going to put in their interest rate, which today's rates are really good, but let's just say the interest rate is 4%. Then it's going to ask me the term of the loan. So that's typically either 15, 20, or 30 years. Most people have 30-year loans. So I've got the loan amount of 200 grand, the interest rate of 4%, the term of the loan is 30 years, which is 360 payments. Then you hit calculate. Once you hit calculate, the amortization schedule should pop up. Now, what I do is I scroll down to month 300 because that's 25 years. Okay. And if we're going to do a 25-year cashback CBO 100 with Americo now, I'm going to pick a 25-year plan that's going to be done in 25 years, which is 300 months. The cash back that I get from that mortgage protection plan will pay off the balance of the loan. So in order for me to make sure that happens, I need to go to month 300 on the amortization schedule. And let's just say that the balance of the loan in month 300 is $30,000. Well, you take $30,000 and divide it by 300, and that would give you a monthly payment of $100. That means in order for me to write them a cashback option plan that guarantees enough cash back to pay the balance of that loan of $30,000 off in 25 years, the monthly premium on that mortgage protection plan needs to be at least $100 a month. So it's pretty simple. I'm sitting with Tom, and Tom has a $200,000. This scenario right here, Tom has a $200,000 loan, 4% interest rate for 30 years. And Tom wants to make sure if something happens to him, his wife is okay, the loan's paid off. So I go, okay, Tom, so if I could show you a way to cover your mortgage as well as if nothing happens to you over the next 25 years, pay that house off 5 years early and save you roughly $50,000, $60,000 in interest, would that be something that you'd be interested in learning about? Tom's always going to say yes. So I run the program. I go, all right, Tom, here's how it works. You're going to have $200,000 death benefit. If you pass away from cancer, stroke, heart attack, fall off a ladder, you're going to get $200,000 to pay the house off. Actually, Kathy's going to get 200 grand, pay the house off. Here's the kicker, Tom. It also has a built-in critical illness rider. So if you get diagnosed with cancer, if you have a stroke, if you have a heart attack, if you can't do 3 of the 5 daily activities of life, getting dressed, getting bathed, eating, getting dressed, getting bathed, feeding, up and down steps, and transportation, then you have access to that $200,000 while you're still alive, okay? Now, why is that important? The average out-of-pocket cost for a cancer patient is roughly $83,000. So if you, from copays, deductibles, missed time work, roughly $83,000. So if you have access to $200,000 while you're battling something like that, A, you're going to have a much better chance of beating the disease, and B, you're not going to struggle financially, which is another big reason why people wind up in a foreclosure, is an unforeseen critical illness. So we're going to have $200,000 of a death benefit, $200,000 of a critical illness benefit included, as well as $100,000 in accidental coverage that's built in. Meaning, Tom, if you were to die in an accident, a car accident, your wife would get $200,000 from the initial death benefit plus another $100,000 from the accidental death benefit. That would be a total of $300,000. She'd be able to pay the house off and then put $100,000 in a savings account or a college fund for your kids to make sure, that they can live a decent life if you, God forbid, are not here. So, Tom, does that all make sense so far? He's going to say yes or no. Watch your clients. If they look at you halfway crooked, that means they probably don't understand. Slow down and explain it again. Go through these benefits. The benefits are what sell this product. When value exceeds price, people buy. This product has so much value that people should be lining up around the corner to get it. Period. End of story. The challenge is I believe that with every ounce of my soul. You have to believe it so that your clients see it. And if they see it, they'll buy. So if they understand the products I've went through, then I move on to the payment. I go, okay, Tom, so you understand what this offers? Yes. Okay. So Tom, this is $150 a month. Okay. It's for 25 years. Remember I said, if you could have a plan that in 25 years, you'd either, God forbid, have passed away, the house is paid off, you become critically ill, it could be paid off, but you still be in an okay financial situation because you have access to $200,000. And then if none of that happens, which is what everybody's goal is, you're going to get all your money back. Tom, that's $45,000 tax-free cash at the end of 25 years. Well, the balance of your loan, Tom, 25 years from today is going to be $30,000. So we're going to take $30,000 from the $40,000 of tax-free cash you get, and we're going to pay your loan off, okay? That's going to leave you with $15,000 tax-free cash. What you're going to save over the next 5 years by not having a mortgage payment is $60,000, okay? Your mortgage payment's $1,200. That's your principal and interest, taxes and insurance. Your principal and interest payments are right around $1,000. $1,000 times 60, which is 5 years, is $60,000. Does that make sense? So you'll have $60,000 savings on interest for your mortgage, and then you'll have $15,000 in cash in your pocket, which is a total savings of $75,000. Make sense? He goes, yes or no. Again, I watch him. If he looks at me crooked, I go through it again slowly. If he gets it, I go, okay, is there any reason you cannot afford $150 a month? Any reason? Is that manageable for you on a monthly basis? He's going to say yes or no. Now, look, I have a $150 payment. What did I need to pay the house off 5 years early? I needed $100. So I do this all the time so that if he goes, that's a little bit more than what I can afford at this moment in time, I have some wiggle room to back that payment down from 150 to maybe 120 or 110 all the way down to 100, which still can accomplish paying his house off 5 years early and giving him good coverage for him and his wife. So that's the cashback option, okay? The no cashback option when to pay off the house in full is the no cashback option. I'm going to offer Tom $200,000 in coverage with $200,000 in critical illness and $100,000 in accidental. And then if budget is super, super tight, then we always have the Americo Payment Protector, which is a decreasing term. And with that, you would do it for 30 years. And at the end of 30 years, if something happens to him between now and 30 years, the balance of the loan would be paid off. There's not going to be any extra. It's not going to be a level death benefit so that if he passes away in year 28 and the balance of the loan is 20 grand, $20,000 gets paid off, but there's $180,000 left over. That's not how the payment protector works, but you get an upfront savings on that price. And if your budget's super tight and the end of the day, the goal is to make sure the house is paid off in full, then payment protector is a really good option to look at. It just does not have the critical illness. So for me, I've used it. I use it sparingly because I'd much rather do a partial payment, which is the second mortgage protection close, and given the critical, chronic, and terminal illness. But that's option number one. You're going to pay the house off in full. You could do the cashback option. You could pay the house off early. You could do the payment protector. All those work just fine. So let's go into option number two. Option number two is a partial payoff. Again, this is something that if the numbers work, you could potentially pay a house off early. If you got a client that's in their 40s or late 40s, early 50s, yes, you could potentially look at the numbers working. That's just where you have to get comfortable running the amortization schedule going, hey, if we've got a 54-year-old with a $200,000 loan and at the end of 25 years, the balance of the loan is going to be $30,000. Well, if I only need a $100 a month payment, then $100,000 on a 54-year-old for 25 years with cash back is going to be over $100 a month. We can make that scenario work where they're going to have enough cash back at the end of the 25 years to pay the house off early. At the end of the day, it's all that matters. If you have the amortization schedule, you can back into that figure with any type of plan you want. It's just most of the time, the majority of the time, the cashback option to pay the house off early works with full coverage. And again, I'm not telling you can't work with partial, but sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. So with the partial coverage, again, you're in a scenario where you have a husband and a wife. They make fairly close to the same amount of money, and maybe they're a little bit older, up in age, and they have a $200,000 loan, but they can't both afford $200,000 in coverage on each one of them with critical, chronic, terminal illness at the full rate. But if we were able to, like I said a little bit earlier, get that mortgage payment from $1,200, $1,300 a month down to, say, $600 or $700 a month, then they could be okay financially. Then we'll look at doing, again, either a CBO 100, a non-CBO. And here's the kicker with these. So when you're doing partial coverage, I always run that payment. So if I go, Tom, if God forbid something happened to Mary, your payment now on the mortgage is $1,300. What could you afford without her income for a mortgage payment? If he goes, I could do half of that. Okay, that's $650 a month. I'd run my mortgage calculator to figure out what I need that loan amount to be to get the payment down to $650. Now that's with the taxes and the insurance. So if the loan amount's $200,000, I might need to get that loan amount down to $80,000 in order to have that payment be at $650 with taxes and insurance. But whatever that number is the number of the partial coverage I'm putting in place. And here's the cool thing. You don't always have to have a 30-year with these plans. If the target number, let's just say, is $75,000 balance, in order for me to get the payment down to where Tom and Mary can afford it, I need the balance of the loan to be down to $75,000. So if I go back to my mortgage amortization schedule and I see that after year 22, the balance of the loan's going to be, or after year, say, 18, the balance of the loan's going to be down to $75,000. Well, now I know that I can do a 20-year plan, because at the end of the 20 years, the balance is going to be below $75,000. If something happens to either one of them, they'd be able to refinance the property, lower the amount, lower the payment, and they could live in that house comfortably. That's all the goal is, to make sure that they don't lose their house. So with that, again, you can do a cashback option if it fits. You can do a non-cashback option. You can do a payment protector with this. It's absolutely possible, because it's just numbers. The payment protector, the way it works is it's decreasing term. But if you did a 30-year payment protector, or even a 15-year, because you were trying to get to a target loan amount of, say, $75,000, and you put $125,000 in place up front, payment protector for 15 years, then you know that in year 1 through 15, if they pass away, there will be enough to pay off that loan amount to get it down, to $75,000. And again, this is just working the numbers. I think a lot of times people get confused with this because it is numbers, but once you understand how the numbers work, it's really just backing into a scenario. So if you want to keep it simple, then don't even worry about the payment protector. Figure out what that number needs to be for the mortgage payment and put that amount of coverage into play for as long as it takes for that balance of that loan to get to that payment, to get to that number. So in this scenario, again, we're trying to get it to $75,000. We looked at our amortization schedule. It took 18 years to get the balance from $200,000 to $75,000. I know I need 20 years in coverage to make sure that if over the next 25 years or next 20 years, if something happened to Tom or Mary, that the loan amount would be brought down to $75,000. And then after that 20-year period, the loan amount's below $75,000. They're good to go. They can do a lot of different things at that point in time. So that's partial coverage. This one's a fairly popular option as well, because again, we're not looking at full coverage for everybody because of the budget that most people are on. And nowadays with COVID, people's hours getting cut in some industries, you have to be a little more hypersensitive to what their budget is, because if you put a plan in place that these folks keep for 4 years and then cancel it, you haven't really done them much of a service at all. So when I'm sitting with a client, I'm doing my best to make sure that not only can they afford it today, but if something, God forbid, happened in 4 or 5 years, would this be a payment that if you had to change jobs and take a little pay cut, that you'd still be able to manage? Because this is more important than most of the bills people have, but most people don't look at it as being that important. They look at it as almost being a burden because it's something you really don't see value in until you need it. And we don't know when you're going to need it. Only God knows when you're going to need it. The critical chronicle terminal illness part of this has really added so much value to it. But even with those, you still don't know when you're going to need it. And if you don't have it when the time comes, you wish you would have. We just don't want to have somebody have it, then cancel it, and then wind up with one of those conditions and then go, you know what, I wish I would have kept it, or I wish it would have been a little bit cheaper because I would have kept it. I just couldn't afford it that moment in time. I was talking to one of our newer agents the other day, and she said something I really like. She said, do me a favor. If something doesn't work out with this, if this payment becomes too much for you, promise me that you will call me. Promise me that you'll call me because I can't help you if I don't know what's going on. So make me that promise that you will call me. And that's a great concept. It's a great idea. If y'all aren't doing that, I would start doing it because you want your clients to know that if something does come up, if times get tight, if they lose a job or if they get laid off, you really can't help them if you don't know any of this stuff is going on. But the worst thing in the world they can do is just cancel their policy and then think they're going to re-pick it up later on down the road. Too much can happen in that period of time. So option number 1, pay off the house in full. Option number 2, partial payoff. Option number 3 is a transfer of assets plan. Now, this is the one that I like because this is where we'll get a lot of other agents from other IMOs or other captive agencies that will go into a home and they'll sit down with Tom and Mary and they'll go, Tom and Mary might be in their 70s. They might have a $200,000 loan amount and a $1,200 a month payment. And they'll go, okay, Tom, okay, Mary, we're going to give you 1 year of payment protection. And they might even close it. But a lot of times they don't. But then I go, what happens at the end of the 12 months? Is Mary going to sporadically get a $1,200 a month increase in pay? I mean, they're both retired. Is Social Security going to go up 100% in 12 months? No. So all we've done is put a non-waterproof Band-Aid on a cut when you're about to go swimming because it's going to fall off. The Band-Aid comes off at the end of 12 months. She's in the same predicament she was prior to him dying. We just prolong the inevitable. Our job is not to put a Band-Aid or patch things up. Our job is to solve the problem. So transfer of assets plan is kind of like this. And I went into Tom and Mary and putting a Band-Aid on it because I see these last 3, the transfer of assets, the equity protection, the reverse mortgage plan. I see them bundled into one a lot with other agents in the way they think, but they're 3 very different things. So a transfer of assets plans means I have a loan and I have some separation between the loan amount and the value of the property. Meaning the house is worth $300, I owe $100. The house is worth $450, my loan amount's $150. Anything above what you owe on the property as far as value goes is what we call equity. So the higher the equity, the closer the bank watches the property. So if you have a house that's worth, say, $500,000 and you only owe $100,000 on it, that's $400,000 in equity. When you die, the bank is notified. The first thing they look up is the loan amount. The second thing they look up is the fair market value of the property. And when there's a big gap there, they watch that property like a hawk because the contract is binding between the person that took the loan out and the bank. Not their kids, not their grandkids, not their cousins, not their friends. It's the person that took the loan out and the bank. So they're hoping that somebody makes a mistake, misses a payment, misses 2 payments, because then they'll just take the property because that's what the contract says. Then the bank will sell the property for 300, 400, 500 grand. Usually they sell it at auction a lot cheaper, but they'll sell it for $350,000, $400,000. They'll pay off the $100,000 that you owe or that they still owed on the house, and then they'll pocket the rest. They don't give it to your kids. They don't give it to your grandkids. They keep it. So the transfer of assets plans is a scenario where Tom or Mary, it could be both, have a child or a grandchild that owns their own house. I'm sorry, they don't own their own house. They want to make sure that, I went into all this. That's really equity protection. I'm sorry. So we're going to go equity protection and then transfer of assets. So Tom and Mary have a house with equity in it. Again, $500,000 house, $100,000 loan amount. They want to make sure that when they die, that their son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, cousin, niece, nephew can sell the property because they already have their own house. They don't want that house, but they want to be able to sell the property and get what's left in it, the equity, out. This typically takes 12 to 18 months, depending on what the house is valued at. I mean, depending on what the condition the house is in, if there needs to be any work, if they need to, do any painting or, mechanical work to get it, what I always say, fixed up, cleaned out, fixed up, listed, and sold. In order to get the house presentable to go on the market, you need time, and sometimes you need money. So for me, an equity protection plan is anywhere from 12 to 16 months worth of mortgage payments. So let's just make it easy. The mortgage's payment is $1,000 a month. So I'm going to go, okay, so I'm going to put $16,000 in coverage in place, plus I'm going to give them $5,000 to $10,000 in extra money in case anything needs to be fixed. Furnace, roof, paint job, curbside appeal, anything that can add a little bit more value to that property to have it sold at top dollar. So essentially, I'm giving them 12 to 16 months worth of mortgage payments and a couple extra $1,000 on top to, again, get the house cleaned out, cleaned up, fixed up, listed, and sold. But I'm not saying I'm giving you 12 months payment protection. I'm telling you, I'm giving you an equity protection plan. Okay? It's a different idea. 12 months of payment protection has no plan. They can cover the mortgage for 12 months. But when I go, we're going to put you in the equity protection plan. And let me explain to you what that is. We're going to make sure that Tom or Mary, when y'all pass, or when one of you pass, or when the last one of you are gone and this house is going to be sold, whoever does that is going to have the ability to make that mortgage payment while they get the house cleaned out, cleaned up, fixed up if needed to be, listed and sold. And they're also going to have a little bit of extra money in case, because y'all do know, like, if you do an FHA loan and an FHA appraiser comes out and they do an FHA inspection, if there's some things wrong with the house, in order for the bank to release the funds to the new mortgagee, those things need to be fixed, which costs money, which 90% of the time falls back on the seller. So it could be electrical stuff, could be mechanical stuff, it could be roofing stuff, it could be window stuff, it could be, I've seen railings on the front porch, steps, safety stuff, anything. Whatever the inspector says needs to be done has to get done. Well, that all costs money. So Tom and Mary, we're gonna make sure that if the market, now it's a seller's market today, Tom and Mary, but if you remember back in 2009, it was taken anywhere from 12 to 24 months for properties to sell. Now, I hope we never get back to that point again, but you know what? I don't anticipate it happening, but I can't promise you it will never happen. So what I usually do is do about 16 months so that if some things need to get fixed up before it gets listed, they have some time to do that as well as the money. And if the market's not a seller market like it is right now and it takes a little longer to list, they don't have to take a lesser offer because they have to unload the property. We're just trying to make sure that they maximize what they get out of what you guys have worked so hard to maintain over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Does that make sense? That's how we're going to protect your equity, Tom and Mary. Now, the plan you guys are going to use for that is going to be a whole life plan typically. Why? Because we don't know how long they're going to be on this earth for. If they're usually up in age, 60s, 70s, 80s, we don't want to do a term plan because at the end of the 15 years, 20 years, if they're still alive, they're still a balance on the loan. Now there's no coverage. The equity protection plan is gone out the window. So with the equity protection plan, I typically use whole life. And it's also not normally over $35,000, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000. That would be a lot for an equity protection plan. So whole life, it's level, it's guaranteed, and it's forever. That's what we're looking for. But we're protecting the equity. It's a different pitch. Transfer of assets plan is the same difference. I want to make sure that, and there could be equity in the home for that, but if Tom and Mary have a son that doesn't have a house and they want to make sure that when they die, the child can move into that house and take it over, they're going to transfer that asset from them from one to another. Well, if there's equity there, again, the bank's still looking for you to make a mistake because they want to take that house because they can put it on the market, they can put it on an auction block, and they can sell it, and they can take that money, and it's essentially free to them. So when we're doing a transfer of assets plan, we need to look at the fair market value of a property, which, again, in this scenario, we've been using. House is worth $500, the balance of the loan's $100. Tax assessment, you're going to go 6% transfer taxes on $500,000. So in order for to transfer an asset, and it's state by state, I can tell you what Maryland was. Maryland, you used to be able to add children to your title and deed without having to pay transfer taxes, but the state changed that law, I don't know, 13 years ago. So now the only time you can add somebody to your title of your house is if they're a spouse. So if we're transferring the assets from a mom and dad to a son or a daughter, the child has to, even if the balance of the loan is zero, right? Even if it's zero, they still have to pay transfer taxes. So $500,000 times 6% would be what? $30,000? That would be transfer taxes. Now, if you have a mortgage payment involved in that, so and here's how I tend to explain that. And most of our clientele don't have houses worth $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Some of them might, but they're typically $300,000-$400,000 max, $250,000. But let's just say Tom and Mary's son rents an apartment, and their goal is to transfer the house to their son when they die. But their son, Junior, signs a lease on an apartment today, and then Senior, Tom, passes away next week, but Junior just signed a 12-month lease. Well, inside that 12-month lease, there's a cancellation clause. So if he wants to get out of that lease, some of them are 3 months, some of them are 6 months. You pay a big penalty to get out of that lease. So I always present it like this. Tom, Mary, we want to make sure that your son can get into this house when you pass. We know it's going to cost money. We know he's going to have to pay transfer taxes. But what I want to protect as well is if, God forbid, the place he's living at now, he still has, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months on that lease, that he can afford to either buy out of that lease or B, make that lease payment as well as this mortgage payment until he can get rid of one or the other. We don't want them to have two payments. Most folks don't have enough in their account, don't make enough on a monthly basis to cover two mortgages. And essentially rent is just as much as mortgages in certain situations. You know, you rent an apartment for $1,000 a month. You rent a house or a condo or a townhouse for $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month. If he's got to rent that for $1,300 a month plus his parents' mortgage payment, which is $1,200 a month, that's $2,500 a month. We need to make sure that Junior can cover the mortgage payment for up to 12 months, because that's typically the longest the lease will be, as well as cover the transfer taxes. So in that scenario, again, you're looking at a whole life plan, because we don't know how long that's going to take. The transfer taxes are never going to go away. Even if the balance of the loan is zero, the transfer taxes are still going to be paid. The transfer taxes are based off the estimated value, the tax assessment on that property, which is usually, 20, 25% lower than the actual appraisal, but it's still there. It's never going away. So we don't want to use a term, because if the parents live to be 89 years old or 95 years old, they're still going to have that transfer taxes covered when they die. So we want something that's going to cover them whether they live to be 62 or 102. We need that 12 months worth of mortgage payments, and then the transfer taxes to transfer the to transfer the asset to them. So again, it's a lot of times I'll see in this scenario, an agent will come in and go, yeah, we're going to give your son 12 months worth of mortgage payments. That's it. But they don't talk to them about the assets. They don't talk to them about the transfer taxes. They don't talk to them about the lease that he might have and the prepayment penalty he might have if he tries to get out of his lease. They don't talk to him about how that process is going to go for Junior to get into this house, because they want to transfer that to him. They just say, hey, we're going to cover the payments for 12 months. Who do you think brings more value to the table? Someone that goes, all right, we're going to give your son 12 months worth of mortgage payments. Good luck. Have a nice day. Or someone like myself who comes in and goes, all right, so when you pass and Junior's going to take over this property, here's what's going to happen step by step. Step by step. They're going to pull the tax assessments. They're going to say transfer taxes of this. You got to get it recorded, which is $900 through a title company. If there's still a balance of the loan, he's going to have to finance that into his name, make payments like a normal mortgage, but he's got a rent payment now, which he can't get out of unless he pays a huge prepayment penalty. So we want to make sure that he at least has the time to get through that. And then at the end, in no more than 13 months, this house will be in his name, and the bank won't take the house from him. Do you think they're going to be more comfortable with that, or someone that goes, here's 12 months worth of payment protection? I can tell you I've done it tons of times, and I've sat in homes where I go, well, people go, well, you're the third person that's been here. And I go, well, what happened to the first two? Well, all they wanted to do was cover my mortgage payments for 1 year. And I go, okay, yeah, I get that. And then I wind up sitting down with them, and they go, yeah, they wanted to give me $25,000 of whole life insurance. Now, I'm not looking for whole life insurance. I'm looking for mortgage protection. And then I go, okay, so what do you want to have happen to the house? They go, well, my kids are going to sell it. I just want to make sure that, they can sell it when I die. I go, okay, perfect. So you want to protect your equity. They go, yeah. I go, okay. How much is your mortgage payment? $2,000 a month. All right. And how long do you think the house would take to sell? No more than 8 months. All right. So then we'll look at a year, because we want to make sure that the market's not as good as it is now, and they're sitting on this property, that they have some time to get it sold. So we're going to look at like $20,000 to $25,000 of coverage, and then maybe an extra $5,000 in case they need to get the house cleaned out, listed and sold. They go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Same amount of coverage as the two guys that were in there before me. But because I presented it just a little bit different, they go, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. I want that. It's just how we present to them. Or again, I'm trying to solve a problem. They're just trying to make a sale. I'm trying to solve their problem, not just today, tomorrow, the next year, forever. I'm trying to permanently solve the problem that they have. The problem is they want to make sure that that property goes to their son or daughter, or they want to make sure the house gets listed and sold. That's the issue. Or the payment's too much, I can't afford it. I got to identify the problem, give them a solution. So we've gone through paying off the house in full, paying off the house partially, equity protection, transfer of assets, and then the last type of mortgage protection close is your reverse mortgage. Now, this one is one that if you don't understand what a reverse mortgage is, I highly encourage you to do some research and learn a little bit about how they work. And I'll go through it with you right now. I'll take a few minutes and explain it before I go into how I present this. But you're definitely going to want to read up on it so that you can talk to clients and sound intelligent about it. So the reverse mortgage works this way. First of all, there's some things that have to happen in order for you to qualify for a reverse mortgage. One, you have to be 62 years of age or older. And two, you have to have 50% equity. Okay? So if the house is worth $200,000, your loan amount that you have now cannot be more than $100,000 in order for you to qualify for a reverse mortgage. Okay? So when I go into a presentation like this is typically a standard husband and wife, both above the age of 62, might have just refinanced their house because they didn't make the greatest financial decisions while they were working. They overspent, they overextended themselves. Now they have a mortgage payment and they're retired and they're trying to get the mortgage payment down as low as possible so that they can live their golden years without stressing out about a mortgage. So they do a 30-year loan and they start all over at age 65. So that's your ideal candidate for a scenario like this. So when I'm sitting with Tom and Mary in a scenario like this, I'll go, okay, Tom and Mary, there's two ways to eliminate a mortgage payment. Do you know what they are? And usually they'll go, what do you mean by that? And I'll go, there's two ways that you can get rid of this mortgage payment. Only two ways. Do you know how to get rid of the mortgage payment? And Tom, you go, yeah, you pay the house off. That's one. I go, yep. And then do you know the other way? And they'll go, no. I'll go, okay, before I tell you the other way, I just need you to understand something. I don't work for a bank. I don't do loans. I'm not a loan officer. I'm just educating you on how this stuff works. That's my only job, okay? So the only two ways to eliminate a mortgage payment, Tom and Mary, is to A, pay the house off, or B, reverse the mortgage, okay? And if you do that, either one of them can work, but one of them requires a lot more coverage than the other, and I'll explain that to you in a second. So Tom and Mary, y'all are 65. You have a loan amount of $150,000. You have a value of a property that's $240,000. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use round numbers for this setting just to make it easy on myself. You have a house that's worth $150,000. You have a loan amount of $100,000. Okay. So Tom and Mary, there's again two ways to eliminate a mortgage payment. One, pay the house off in full, which would be $100,000 in coverage. The other would be to reverse the mortgage. Now, in order to qualify for a reverse mortgage, and again, I'm not a loan officer. I'm not trying to sell you a loan. I'm giving you concepts and ideas of how you can handle the situation, because we've already established, Tom and Mary, if something happened to either one of you, you'd lose the income of the other, and it would be an extremely tough situation financially to stay in this property. Is that safe to say? Yes. Perfect. So in order to qualify for a reverse mortgage, Tom and Mary, you have to be 62 years old at least, and that's fine because you both are 65, and you have to have 50% equity. That's where we come in, Tom and Mary. So the balance of your loan is $100,000. Okay. The value of your loan is $150,000. 50% equity means you take the fair market value divided by 2, which $150,000 divided by 2 is $75,000. In order for you to get a reverse mortgage, you would have to have $75,000 in equity. Well, you only have $50,000 right now. But I can show you two ways to handle this. One way is $100,000, Tom, and we want to do that for 15 years, because in 15 years you would already have another $25,000 in equity. But a 15-year term for $100,000 on you, Tom, is $385 a month. Okay, that would do what this wants to do, or it would pay that would pay the entire house off over the next 15 years. Or Tom, we could look at something like this. You're short $25,000 to qualify for a reverse mortgage. And if you had that today, we could eliminate that mortgage payment altogether. We could take 25 grand, apply it to your loan amount, bring it down to $75,000. You could call the bank. You could tell them you want to reverse the mortgage. They would eliminate that payment for you and Mary forever until the day you both were gone. And then your kids have 12 months to either refinance the house in their name or get it cleaned up, cleaned out, listed, and sold. They'd have 12 months. That's what the reverse mortgage contract says. But you don't have that 25 grand. That's where we come in. So, Tom, Mary, if we were to put $25,000 in place on you, $25,000 in place on Mary, and either one of you die, we take that 25 grand, pay that loan amount down from 100,000 to 75,000. Now we're at that magical rate of 50% loan to value. You both are already 65, which means you qualify. Now we can call the bank, reverse the mortgage. That $1,200 mortgage payment or that $700, $800 mortgage payment goes away. You're still going to have your property taxes and your insurance. That's never going away. But, Tom, $25,000 on each one of you. Tom, for you at 65 is $162 a month. Mary, for you, it's $148. Okay? That's $310 a month for both of you to have coverage and peace of mind, as opposed to just Tom at $100,000 for $385 a month. Does that make sense? Guys, people jump all over this option because it eliminates the problem. Like, and a lot of folks, what I've noticed, and I run in Baltimore, I've run in St. Louis, Missouri, I've ran in Virginia, I've ran in DC, I've ran in PA, New Jersey, Ohio. I've ran almost up and down the East Coast. The scenario is the same. A lot of folks rely on both Social Securities and at least one pension. But when a spouse dies, the surviving spouse keeps the higher of the two Social Securities, which means they're losing one. And if the spouse that died was the one that had the pension, the surviving spouse a lot of times only gets 50% of that. So we're looking at a scenario where they really cannot afford the mortgage if in the event one of them dies. And in order for us to be able to help them, we have to eliminate that mortgage payment. But we get caught up in trying to sell them full protection, and they can't afford that either. Where when we do something like the reverse mortgage plan, we're just giving them enough money to cover the shortage in equity that they have when they die. The beautiful thing about this is you can also do a 15-year term for reverse mortgage protection. Because, again, in 15, and you pull your amortization calculator out, look at projections of the fair market value of the properties, but typically in 15 years, the value is going to go up enough and the balance is going to go down enough to where they have that magical number of 50% equity to qualify. So sometimes if the client's healthy enough and you need a little bit more coverage, like maybe a $80,000 plan, there's a gap of 80 grand, you can look at a 15-year term, which is, again, still not going to kill them. But it's a heck of a lot better than having to do a 30-year full payoff, and they can't afford it. They wind up keeping it for 2 or 3 years and then canceling it because something came up. So, again, guys, I hope this helps, but you have your pay off the house in full. You have the partial payoff. You have the transfer of assets. You have the equity protection, and then you have the reverse mortgage close. Our job is to get in the house, fill out your financial inventory, narrow it down what scenario best fits that need, present it to them, show them the value, and then take a check. It's really not that complicated, but this to me made it so simple because I had a plan for every scenario I ran into. And again, you could tell me there's 10 different other ways to do this, and I would tell you they all tie into one of these 5 categories. All of them. Because we're either paying the house off, paying some of it off, transferring it to somebody, they're selling it to get the equity, or they're doing a reverse mortgage close or a reverse mortgage at some point in time so that they can afford or they can eliminate the mortgage payment because they cannot afford full coverage. So, guys, I really do hope this helps. This has been fun. Do your research on mortgages, learn a little bit about it. There's tons of videos out there from tons of great producers that talk about mortgage protection. This is just, for me, the easiest way to do it. So I hope it helps. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Take care.